We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that.
Okay, I got an aircraft 6 miles east of the White House.
It's rocking back and forth.
Number 56865, I advise you stay away from that aircraft. Go north as fast as you can.
United 9-3, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land?
He did not land.
There are days in our lives that forever change us, whether as individuals or as nations. The tragic events of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, a day when terrorists used commercial airliners as weapons to attack our financial and government facilities, killing thousands of civilians, is such a day. And we will never forget.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
Hello, my name is Vincent Aiello. I am the founder and host of the Fighter Pilot Podcast, and I recently had the opportunity to chat with Martin Richard, a now retired Massachusetts Air National Guard F-15 Eagle pilot who was airborne on 9/11/01. I hope our discussion sheds light on the military aviation response to the events of that day, and that you are reminded of the sacrifices made by so many on that day and in the many days since.
These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve.
All right, Martin, I don't know about you, but I can barely remember what I had for dinner last night or the night before, but this is September, and every September we think about events on 9/11/01, and I bet you can remember that day, can't you?
Yeah, I sure can. Like yesterday, for sure.
Yeah.
It's something, every year when it rolls around, it kind of catches me off guard. But then definitely, feel back to that time and what was going on that day.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. You were an F-16 pilot on that day, and where were you operational?
Well, it was F-15s.
15, excuse me.
Yeah, and I was flying the Eagle out of Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts,
All right.
Cape Cod.
How long had you been doing that by that time?
Let's see, I got there in mid-'99 after doing some active duty time. And so a couple of years there, and we had we used to have a alert commitment there at Otis where we had 2 jets on alert 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So
was that called Noble Eagle back then, or was it called something else?
Yeah, that was just after 9/11. And Noble Eagle was basically the CAP missions, Combat Air Patrol missions. Over.
Right, but you guys were standing alerts on September 10th, 2001?
Yeah, for years and years, 30 years, believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, so
just like NORAD stuff, or
NORAD, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Some drug interdiction stuff too, but mostly NORAD.
Okay. All right. So when you were standing those alerts, how far away were you, if you will? Like the alerts I'm used to on a carrier are alert 7, you're sitting in the airplane, 15, you're in the ready room in your flight gear, 30 is you're in a flight suit, and then 60 and 120, of course, you can't go farther than wherever you can go on the ship. But
right.
what posture would you guys stand prior to that day?
So we were what's called immediate, which would be, not in the jet, but you had to be, airborne immediately, basically.
Wow.
And
Okay.
typically our jets were parked across the ramp. So it was a, 2-minute car ride across the ramp to jump in the jets. And then at night, after hours, we had a living facility right there attached to them. So.
All right. So you had to be relatively close.
Right.
All right. So tell us about on the morning, morning on the East Coast of 9/11. You guys, did you say earlier you had already been flying that day?
So I was going in for just a regular training mission. We were doing a 4v4 similar, combat training mission. We had 2 guys on alert, obviously, and I remember it was a beautiful day up in Cape Cod. I mean, it was the perfect day to go flying. I was also a pilot at Airline, so I was getting ready to leave for a trip the next morning. But I remember sitting at Dunkin' Donuts getting a coffee on the way to work and hearing that, it was the UN like National Day of Peace or something to that effect. And just kind of driving into work thinking that this is like the perfect day to fly. Mm-hmm. So that's what we were going into train, and showed up a couple hours early to get the briefing boards ready and everything. And our director of operations was actually on alert that day, and saw him at the desk. We typically wore some of our gear just to expedite if you were on alert. We'd have our G suits on in case the horn went off. But yeah, I mean, totally typical normal day flying ahead of us is what we thought.
Yeah. Just to draw a parallel, I was in Fallon, Nevada at the time, and I woke up, I think I was in the car at 6 something, so that would have been 9 something your time. And I remember hearing on the radio that an airplane had crashed into the World Trade Center. My first impression was, what an idiot. How can you not see this thing and avoid it? So at any rate, so you're probably up early, and so you go out on this flight, and I assume it's uneventful. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so, and it's funny you say that because kind of behind the scenes, we didn't know what was going on because we were pre-flighting our jets. We briefed normally and went out to our jets, but we had a command post right in there that controlled all the alert assets, and right in our squadron building, and then an operations desk that kind of did the training day-to-day stuff. And one of our enlisted guys at the operation desk got a call from the tower at Otis saying, hey, we've got Boston Center on the line. There's something about a hijacking. And that was completely out of, the chain that it should have fallen through, to get through NORAD into the command post. And so our squadron commander, who was kind of supervising that day, the flying operation, ran into the command post. And he literally had Boston Center on one phone and NORAD on another phone. And he was kind of the go-between trying to figure out what was going on. So he called the alert guys into the command post, and same kind of thing. He said, hey, we've got a confirmed hijacking, get out to the jets and just await words. And, and talking to them after the fact, they, just like you said, they thought, this was like a hijack jet that was going to land. They were going to escort it and land it somewhere. There'd be
demand a bunch of money or something.
Exactly, and then that'd be that. And so while we were doing our pre-flight on our jets, there were 8 of us. We saw the security forces come out onto the flight line with their lights flashing, and just because we had seen it so many times, they're getting scrambled, but not really thinking a whole lot about it because it wasn't uncommon that would happen on a day-to-day basis. And so we saw them blast off, and then it was kind of out of sight, out of mind until we took off about 10 minutes later. Our training area kind of runs along Long Island, south over the ocean there, and they just leave us alone out there. But we were in the training area getting ready to fight, and they said, hey, it's Boston Center. You guys need to get back home, which was really, I've never heard that call before. That was unusual.
Yeah.
So we called our squadron ops, and they said, yeah, let's get back as soon as you can. And meanwhile, those guys were pretty much almost to New York City, the 2 alert jets, when they heard the second jet just crashed in the World Trade Center. And that's the first they knew that anything was going wrong that day, other than that they were getting scrambled to intercept the hijacked airliner.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit, Opus. What would be an alert loadout back then for the F-15?
Yeah, so it changed. I think that day we had 2 external tanks and probably 2 heat-seeking missiles and 4 radar missiles, but I'm not exactly sure about that. There was kind of a standard load for that
Sure.
kind of a mission.
And gun, I'm sure.
And guns, yeah.
And was the idea with the NORAD frame of mind back then that it might be, I mean, what was the threat, quote unquote, prior to that day?
Interesting. There was always and there had been history at Otis of, the Russian bombers kind of a thing, but that hadn't been for years. Mostly it was, unidentified aircraft that were coming into the ADIS that needed to be identified. So,
which is usually just private pilots who screwed up their
especially in the
transponders.
Summertime, fish spotters and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Well, excuse to go flying maybe, but
exactly.
All right. Okay. So the idea of airliners as a weapon probably hadn't kind of occurred to you guys, maybe? Yeah, it certainly hadn't to me at that point.
Yeah.
But, all right. So, sorry to interrupt the story, but all right. So they have you guys come home, and then what?
Yeah. So, just like, I'm sure any fighter pilot would do, they said, stay out by your jets. We're going to, get you what you need, and then we're going to launch again. And of course, you don't turn an F-15 in minutes. So we all ran inside the squadron to see what was going on. But when I was getting into the building, we were watching that just after that second plane had hit World Trade Center. They typically, it would take us 2 hours to turn a jet, get it back airborne, refueled and serviced and everything. And that's without adding live weapons on there. And they had us turned within a half an hour at most. So it was an amazing feat that they achieved to get us back in the air. Initially it was we out of the 8 that we had been on the training mission with, they had 4 ready, and we blasted off. They cleared 2 up to Boston, and then just to cap, and we were headed up towards Boston, got an intercept out over the just off the coast, which turned out to be a C-130, believe it or not. That's how chaotic it was at that point. And, I'll just back up for a second. When I ran out to my jet, I had 2 heat-seeking missiles and a gun loaded up, and one of our intel officers met us at the jet, and he said there's 8 jets airborne with bombs on board, and we've had 2 jets ran out of fuel and crash into the Atlantic. Of course, none of that was true, but that just goes to show you what kind of information we had when we took off. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
So we knew that one of the jets airborne was United 93, and we originally were scrambled out to see what was going on with that jet, but it had crashed just minutes after we took off, so we never got near it. And so then after we went up over Boston, we got vectored down over Long Island, and then there was nothing there. And then they said, we'll head down over New York City, where the original 2 guys who had been scrambled were capping at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's like you said, we didn't know what was going on. And when the first 2 guys were after the impact, they said, basically same mission, meaning what do you want us to do? And NORAD was completely silent. So they didn't know what to do either.
Yeah.
And finally, the flight lead said, well, listen, we're going to set up a cap over New York City. We'll ring around it 25 miles. And nothing will get inside that ring. They didn't want to get drawn off of the cap and then have somebody come from the north or something and execute another attack. So, and back to that mission, when we took off, obviously things had developed a little bit, but they told us, hey, your mission is to intercept and identify. And, if an airliner doesn't comply, then stand by for more words. And I just remember thinking to myself, man, I know what's coming next, and I do not want to have to, shoot down an airliner. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing you got to remember is we were all, Air National Guards. So out of the 6 of us airborne that day, 4 were airline pilots, 2 United, 2 American. So, I tell you, one of bright spots of the day came when our squadron operations came on and said, hey, everybody in the squadron's accounted for, just because we didn't know if anybody was involved with,
Yeah.
the hijacking or whatnot.
Yeah, because at least 93 was out of Boston, or was there more? I don't know that part of it.
Yeah, there were two. So an American and a 93.
Yeah.
So when we finally got down to New York City, the second building had just fallen, and basically the lower part of Manhattan was just covered in smoke. And we kind of thought the buildings went over, not they didn't
Right.
just go straight down. So we didn't know. That was another scary scene because we thought 50,000 people had died. We had no idea, and that's kind of when it clicked and went, look, you're here to do a mission, and you're not making the decision. You're executing the decision that the people on the ground, hopefully with a big picture, are making. And so it's kind of the country's counting on you to get it done and make this stop.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it was really interesting, looking back on it, working with New York Approach, who never worked with military before. And they were just calling targets out all over, New York City, New Jersey, and everything. And we basically said, listen, you guys are giving us good information, but we need to know where the target is, maybe an altitude if you have it, and then we just need you guys to be quiet once we say, we're radar contact. So they caught on really quickly, and it was actually really effective for having never worked with them before and them never working with us before.
Yeah.
To chase down aircraft.
Yeah. Did you end up intercepting any civilian guys that were just out, had no clue what was going on? And
yeah. And so, and also, believe it or not, lots of helicopters, military even, that were coming to sort of lend aid and possibly help evac out.
Yeah.
And I don't know how effective that was, but I do remember, intercepting a 3-ship of Chinook helicopters, and then coming up on guard and saying, hey, don't shoot us down. It's like, we're here to help too, and it was just like, it was just crazy because there was there was no real operational control of what was going on right then. So
when you think of the expression fog of war, is that kind of, you think about that day?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it helped stabilize the situation, that we kind of took control of it from the air, and that we could see what was going on. Shortly after we got on cap, we heard, hey, we're having the same issues in Washington, D.C. And it was really one of those things that, your heart started racing again. But, it was like, look, here's our responsibility. This is our AOR. It's over the World Trade Center, and they're going to have to get someone else to deal with that, and kind of compartmentalize that and just concentrate on what we were doing.
Yeah. I don't know about you, Opus, but you join the military, you expect that you're going to sacrifice where you want to go, where you want to live, even maybe what airplane you fly. And I talk to young people on this show about that all the time, because you may not get the airplane you want, but you try to make the most of it. And I think I was personally ready for most things, but the thought of shooting down an airliner full of people, just that was out of left field. When I started contemplating that, and I was never, of course, in a position where I was flying like you were, but you were I guess my point is that much closer. You're in the airplane, hey, you're all business, but you kind of alluded to it before. What was that like for you? Did you allow that to creep in a little bit?
I mean, it did, I'll be completely honest with you. And, I had flown combat missions before, and it sounded like combat. So to juxtapose that over your city, you're in the United States, it was, that was hard to deal with. But like I said, once we got down to ground zero, it had to stop. And that was, part of the oath you took. It's people ask me all the time, well, looking back, what do you think about that day? Well, it was probably the worst flying day I had, but also, in a way, I was pretty lucky because I didn't have to, because that would have obviously been a life-changing event. The truth is that those terrorists, they knew what they were doing. You weren't going to save the people on those airliners, unfortunately.
That's right.
No matter what. So it became about regaining air superiority over a country and protecting the people on the ground.
Yeah. And I have to think, as I got to be delicate here. I mean, if you assume the airplane is going to crash, right? The people on board are almost a sunk cost, and I would never consider someone's life a sunk cost. But I think if you think of the analysis, you could say, okay, that's a foregone conclusion. What can I save if I keep them from striking the White House or the Capitol or whatever the other targets were for? And
unfortunately, they were, on the front lines of the battle that day, and certainly not by choice. And they're all heroes. I mean, I got to meet, many of the families just, in the time after 9/11. It is tragic. It's just absolutely tragic. But, for us, we didn't have a chance to let that emotion come into it at that time. It was something we all dealt with in varying degrees, certainly years after 9/11, and even today. And so, I mean, I guess that's how you process it. We're trained to do a mission, and it's just, even though we weren't planning on that specific mission, we just had to kind of box it off.
When you finally landed that afternoon, how long had you been airborne?
I think about 7 hours, 6 hours. It seemed like an hour, just because it was
so much happening.
Exactly. And I mean, I just, we're going back to the base, requesting an altitude like you normally would do to fly back, an IFR clearance. And they're like, you guys are the only ones flying. Whatever you want. It just was like, wow, I mean, crazy.
Did you guys man alerts through the night or the next day or anything, or fly, I should say, alerts?
Yeah, so that changed a lot after 9/11, and then we kind of had that tiered system that you talked about. I'm sure there was some coordination. What do we have that we've done that would work in this situation? So yeah, we definitely upped our alert commitment. We did not train for the next year. We didn't do one training mission for the next year. Our whole being was all flying combat air patrols over American cities. And then having that immediate response, which, after 9/11, it was anything, obviously these temporary flight restrictions were causing issues for private pilots. You'd have people pop up with similar names that, on a terrorist watch list, we'd go intercept. So then it was really busy for sure. It was like, like you said, on September 10th, they talked about alert being, a mission that was going away. And obviously after September 11th, that all changed in that day.
Well, the world changed too. And I look back and I remember thinking at the time, and I don't pretend to be particularly smart. Everybody knew that the world was going to change, but just our way of life, air travel, certainly. And of course, COVID, I think, is also having a similar effect now on this generation. But I just knew that nothing would ever be the same. And it was definitely one of those days that people who were alive when Kennedy was shot, they say they remember. People who were alive when Pearl Harbor was attacked, same thing. And for those of us who experienced this, it's one of those days you just never forget, certainly for you.
Yeah. And I think, looking back on it, and I've spoken to all kinds of different groups around the country about it. And honestly, it's the thing that resonates with me is that, never forget. I think it's important that we remember, even if it's just once a year, that this is, a turning point in our country's history for many reasons. And that, we owe it to those people who found themselves on the front lines that day, whether they were in the World Trade Center or on one of the airliners, to just pause and remember them and give thanks for the lives that they had. The people in the World Trade Center, they just went to work that day. You know what I mean? And they just they didn't get home that day, and it's just something that I try to really reflect on every day. And feel blessed that I'm here and have this time that they don't. So.